With a unique climate and rich soils, Oregon farmers grow over 200 fruits, vegetables, and other crops. While Oregon has land use laws to protect some farmland from development, farmers and ranchers still face many challenges. The average age of farmers in Oregon is about 60 years old, and nearly 80% of them have no succession plan for their land or business. 2/3 of all Oregon farmland is predicted to change hands over the next 20 years. Land that changes hands with no succession plan is more likely to be fragmented or developed. Land trusts build relationships with farmers, can hold conservation easements on their land, or even own farmland.
Conservation easement is a voluntary agreement by which you keep a piece of land in open space. But you're severing your rights to do development of certain kinds so that that land stays in some kind of conserved status. But there's another subsection of conservation easements called working land easements. And working land easements are trying to protect the land for its agricultural potential or forestry potential. And then knowing that potential, how do we make sure that the easement both protects it under that use, but doesn't interfere with its operation as a working farm or ranch? The reason why most landowners go ahead and do a easement, there's like a legacy reason. They want to make sure that their land stays in an open space condition. But a lot of them are doing it because of cash and tax benefits.
Oftentimes, they can secure some funds from the easement to inject liquidity back into the operation, pay down existing mortgages, and secure additional property next door or otherwise to expand the operation. The potential tax bill that's associated with the estate planning process is often a burden on the family. Accessing funds through a working lands easement oftentimes allows that security to be brought to the family operation at a time that could potentially be stressful.
One way I talk about conservation easements, or really about owning property, is when you are a landowner, you are essentially owning a bundle of rights. Maybe one right is a water right. Maybe one right is a subdivision right. Maybe another one is to build a house. Maybe another one's mining. Regardless, all of these rights together is your ownership, your property ownership. And when you work with a land trust to convey a conservation easement, you're agreeing to give up some of those rights. Whatever it is, it's negotiated between us and the landowner. It's unique for each property. But regardless, you still have that bundle of rights.
A lot of people are really concerned when they do a conservation easement that they're giving up their ownership. It couldn't be farther from the truth in reality. The conservation easements, when they're written, they've got pretty clear indications of what you are and aren't allowed to do. And it's generally, let's say if you're on a ranch like this, I'll say in that we want you to continue ranching, that there's usually only going to be minimal interference, if any, with how that is done. You're still going to be able to keep your house. You may even be allowed to build another house or something like that, so long as the general condition of the property is what we were shooting for it to be. Beyond that, you're going to operate that property, again, within the confines of the document, but pretty much like you would any other day of the week.
Primarily today, I'm an export hay grower. That's been a transition. I grew up on primarily a cattle ranch. I came back here in 2002, and I had a college degree and $1,000 in my checking account. And I worked for my parents for 1 year, and then the neighbor's place came up for sale. I'd known the neighbor since I was he'd known me longer than I remember him, let's just put it that way. And he agreed to finance 65 to 70% of what he was asking for the property. And then I borrowed the down payment from the bank on a 5-year note. And the part that the neighbor would finance, why that piece of property would cash flow that part of its payment. The other $500,000 I had to pay off in 5 years. And so I had to come up with a plan to do that. And within that, a conservation easement was on that list.
Wallowa Land Trust has worked with Woody and Megan Wolf from the very beginning of when our organization came together in 2004. Their project was the first conservation easement that we acquired. It's an incredible piece of property. It includes the confluence of the Wallowa and Lostine rivers, which is also a traditional Nez Perce tribal encampment. The property has incredible wetlands, amazing wildlife habitat, but it's also a working farm. So working with Woody, it was about how their family really wanted to see both those things protected, not just the habitat, but also the future of working lands. There was numerous things that really fit into our goals around land conservation. And Woody and Megan had their goals around, they wanted to keep their farm intact, but they also wanted to get some capital out of it. And so we had a great opportunity to collaborate with their family on a permanent deed restriction that allows for continued farming, ranching on that property, but also while protecting all that incredible habitat and the traditional encampment that is on the land.
I kind of viewed it as a win-win from a financial standpoint and an environmental standpoint. It did create a boost that I needed in the form of paying down term debt, but it was kind of a reshuffle from the original intent of paying on a mortgage.
So once we get to a point where the landowner and the land trust agree that they want to move forward together on a conservation easement, that really is when a lot of the real work begins. We have a list of due diligence activities that we will undertake. We will visit the property. We will document all of the structures that exist or don't exist. We will look at the title. We will get the property appraised. We will create what we call a baseline documentation report, which serves as kind of a reference point for what the condition of the property was at the time that the deed actually closes. Depending upon how large and complex the project is, it would be surprising if you can get it done within a year.
The conservation easement appraisal can happen at any point within the time frame of negotiations from when the landowner and the land trust begin talking to when it finally ends. You take on the appraisal like you would any other appraisal, but really you're doing two in one. So in the before condition, which is, the property without the easement in place, we're looking at highest and best use, typically what you would do under normal appraisal circumstances. So you're putting together your support, your data, your sales, all that legwork that you get done to create or to put together that opinion for the before condition. Again, we look at highest and best use in that after condition. We're looking for sales that have similar restrictiveness to that easement, like our subject easement.
If I want to have a business in this market, it takes land. And that land is sold to me at a price that is not based on the benefit to my business. It's based on what people that have made more money doing something else, typically, will pay for it so that they can look at those mountains. The sale price is set by highest and best use, which in a county that is rural and scenic is usually comparative sales.
So there's 4 tests to highest and best use. What do local, state, and federal regulations keep you from doing or allow you to do? Okay, very important. Physically possible. You wouldn't put a subdivision on a hillside, right? You may not put a almond development in a floodplain, those types of things. So physically possible is another consideration in highest and best use. Then financially feasible. Is it even feasible to look at? Will it break even? Okay, and then maximally productive. What is the highest use that is available to that property? Because once we establish that highest and best use, we're looking for sales with similar highest and best use. So if it's ag, your highest and best use is ag, we're probably not going to go use a small urban transition or rural home site property that's had its highest and best use been determined that way.
Once we're going through all of the due diligence activities for any particular project, one of the things we do is go do a thorough title review. So we get a title report, and this looks really at all of the easements that you may have on your property, whether you have a mortgage or not. And some of those could potentially impede our ability to get a project done because we want to protect a piece of property. But if you have, for instance, maybe a giant easement for an energy company to put a line through the middle of your property, well, then that puts, it's a big obstacle for us to be able to complete that project on the property. One of the most important things really is to make sure that you, as the land trust and the landowner, fully understand what is inside that conservation easement before you sign on the dotted line, because it's a legally binding document that is there in perpetuity. So making sure that you truly understand what is allowed and is not allowed is really important. Challenges to a conservation easement are usually not by the landowner who you initially entered that agreement with. It's successor landowners. It's when someone new buys that property and they don't really understand what that easement means. So we as a community, the land trust community, have learned that communication is absolutely key. And we visit our properties at least once a year. We do monitoring. We visit with the landowner about any potential problem areas. I mean, the last thing we want to do is be in a contentious situation with a landowner. So again, communication, communication, communication.
The easement process financially benefited the business in that once the easement got put in place and I was paid, I was able to use that money to reduce debt. Now it's property that I still own, and if I want to do something, I need to refer back to the easement language and then confer with the land trust. Okay, this is the way I read the easement, so I think that I can do this. Do you read it the same way? Do you think that I can do this? And so there's always that need for communication, where before it would have just been, well, that's not illegal, so I can go do it. I guess my advice would be to understand how multifaceted the easements are. From a tax ramification, from a legal ramification, most landowners are not experts in those fields. Most easement holding entities are not experts in those fields. So try to think of all of the ramifications that doing this easement can have and account for them all moving forward. You might want to pull in some experts in areas that you wouldn't have initially thought of so that you cover all your bases. I think easements, conservation easements, I think they're a great thing. But if the easement holding entity or the landowner goes into it and finishes it and then learns something new after the fact, that's when I think they have a potential to be a huge negative. So before you sign, make 200% sure everybody knows what they're signing and is happy with it. Don't expect the money right away. I think it's not a mistake to do easements at all, but if you're counting on the money and a quick turnaround, you're setting yourself up for disappointment.
Well, our community is small, it's remote. We only have about a little over 7,000 in population. It really hasn't changed much when we talk about permanent residents year-round, but the tourism has expanded exponentially. We get up to 10 times, if not probably more than that, in visitors a year. That's upwards of 1 million people in a year in our small little remote community, which can be wonderful, but it also can be a challenge trying to retain working farms, forests, ranches, because the reality is the more desirable a place becomes, the more people want to come and have their second home or a ranchette. And for a lot of farmers and ranchers, particularly down in the valley, you can make more money off subdividing your farm to a second homeowner than by keeping it in production. And so for us, we really want to see agriculture continue to thrive, not only as an economic driver of our community, but also it's socially important, culturally important. But the things that drive people or bring people to our community, all of those beautiful barns, the beautiful wide open spaces, we want to retain that. So for our land trust, we want to be an option for helping our community retain its rural character.
Well, the easement helps with the resiliency of the farm community in that it keeps land in production. What I see is that when a piece of property sells and it is taken out of ag production, the odds that it benefits our food supply decrease drastically.
You know, one of the most wonderful things really about going through this process from start to finish is how well you get to know the landowner and their family. And I mean, I consider the Wolfs friends of mine after the process we've been through. I adore them. They are thinking about many generations down the road. And for me, that is one of the most inspiring things about being able to do these projects, is because you know it's not just one and done. You'll never see that landowner again. It's like you have a developing relationship that you are lucky enough to have with these wonderful people that is held over time, and you feel like you've accomplished something that really has a meaningful impact on your community that you've done together. And I love that.